Chapter 8. Vanguard. It was the night of October 13th, Jack's birthday, when he got his first glimpse of an anisopter. Riding toward the honey sap for his second night of work, he heard a rhythmic chopping sound very different from the growl of his motorcycle's engine. Thinking the strange noise might be something caught in his wheel, he slowed to a stop along the forest road. Just then the annex passed overhead. The vehicle looked like an enormous dragonfly gliding above the oak trees. In the darkness, Jack could only make out its shape between the blinking red and green lights of its body. As far as he knew, anisopters were only used by animal control. What was one doing here in Hadensburrow? The honey sap was aglow with light from a log fire and buzzing with conversation. At a table in the center of the room, a group of badgers and birds played a game of low-stakes poker. Another group, mostly bunnies and squirrels, yelled encouragement as they watched a wiry rat try to hold his liquor against an opposing black bear. The rat reached for another shot glass with a trembling paw, but had only touched it to his lips before toppling headlong into the table to the pleasure and dismay of onlookers. Jack, a brown apron tied around his waist, did his best to navigate the room with an unsteady tray of drinks. A ginger-colored liquor was lifted from the plate by the victorious bear, who swigged it down and won. Jack worked his way around the card table, delivering drinks to the players. They grunted thanks, drawing their cards close to the chest as he passed. A bell tinkled, and every eye was drawn to the door as 3 new arrivals entered. They were out-of-towners, but certainly not out of their element. The first to enter was a greyhound, tall and slender, with sleek silver fur that glimmered in the firelight. He gazed imperiously down upon the crowd through oval-shaped glasses, stepping smoothly into their midst. Following behind the dog, stooping low as he passed through the door, was a monster of a bull. His horns reached beyond his broad shoulders, and he had to step sideways as he entered. A gust of air snorted out of his fist-sized nostrils as he looked around the room. The third, and certainly the most at ease, was a handsome falcon. He was not as tall as the others, nor as powerfully built, but they turned to look at him, and not until he gave a satisfied nod did they follow him to a table near the center of the room. It was not unoccupied, but the 2 rats quickly vacated their seats and stood watching with the rest of the atypically silent crowd. Even Jack, forgetting his duties, watched the newcomers with a slightly opened mouth. There was something familiar about this group, particularly the falcon, although he couldn't immediately place it. The falcon sat first, looking around the room with a relaxed and friendly smile. He gave a genuine nod of greeting to several patrons, unfaltering as each turned away. The bull, sitting in a chair far too small for him, looked like an oversized child on a time out. He furrowed his heavy brow as if scanning the room for something to punch. As he let out another blast with his nostrils, the crowd took their cue and went back to their conversations. "Welcome to Hadensburrow," Jack started, reciting the greeting Rhoda had prescribed for out-of-towners. "Where are you folks coming from?" The greyhound looked Jack up and down, then looked away smugly, leaning into his elbows. Nonplussed, Jack turned to the others. The bull, who sat nearest, was stone-faced, watching the bunny as if expecting him to turn around and moon them at any moment. The falcon was the only one to respond. "Triarch," he said. He unzipped his jacket and shrugged it off, revealing a falcon insignia on his shirt. Jack nearly dropped his pad and pen. "Isn't that the animal control logo?" he asked, his voice a little higher than usual. "I thought only animal control heroes were allowed to wear it." "That's right," the falcon smiled. Jack's lungs felt heavy, as though the air had suddenly become thick in the dining room. "That annex! Was that you?" And then, like puzzle pieces locking together, it came to him. He'd seen this falcon on TV, being interviewed by reporters. "You're Firebird!" The falcon nodded. Disbelieving, Jack looked at the others. "And that makes you Bullet Hound," he pointed to the greyhound. "And Ford," he said to the bull. "You're Vanguard. You're Animal Control's best team."
"Only when we're working,"
the falcon said with a satisfied smile.
"What's your name, kid?"
Jack," he stammered. "Jack Roberts."
"Jack Roberts, I'm Grayson Conway. This is Edward Dixon, he gestured toward the greyhound, and Hugo Ford, he motioned toward the bull. We're just passing through, staying down the road at Tom Pillinger's. Nice place, but a little quiet for our liking.
In an effort to keep his cool, Jack flicked open his pad and clicked his pen. Well, welcome. What can I get for you?
Whatever dark beer you've got is fine for myself and Hugo here, the falcon said, flicking a flight feather toward the bull. Jack turned to the greyhound. And for you, sir? Red wine. Mouse, if you've got it, the dog said, casting a half-lidded look around the honey sap, as if its ability to supply mouse-made wine was doubtful. Jack gave a small nod and turned to walk away, but at that moment the door burst open with a crash and a tinkle. I don't care, you bug-eyed little pansy. That's his bike, so he's here somewhere. Recognizing that voice, Jack turned toward the door to see Chuck, the oversized and bad-tempered rat, stumping into the room. By his tone, Jack guessed that he hadn't quite gotten over their card game, and sure enough, when his eyes locked onto Jack's, he let out an angry yell and began shoving his way through the crowd. Friend of yours?
Conway asked, leaning back into his chair and watching the rat with mild interest. Chuck forced his way through the crowd until he reached the bunny. You and me, we got unfinished business, he growled through gritted teeth as he wrapped his fingers into Jack's shirt collar. Excuse me, Rhoda called. The badger woman marched out from behind the counter, brandishing a wooden spoon at Chuck. You can just turn around and walk right back out that door. This isn't a place for trouble. Shut up, you old bat, Chuck slurred. His rancid breath sprang into Rhoda's face. He turned again to the bunny and drew back a balled fist. Jack clenched up, waiting for the blow. Instead, he felt a sudden warmth across his whole body. Opening his eyes, he saw Chuck haloed in a yellow-white light emanating from behind him. Everyone around was shielding their eyes, and the rat turned slowly, his fingers leaving Jack's collar.
That wasn't a very courteous thing to say, now was it?
Said a godlike voice. It seemed to come from everywhere, echoing, filling the room. A glowing figure was standing atop the table, flickering like a holiday sparkler and looking down upon the rat through white-hot eyes.
Apologize.
The rat looked as if he was seeing his own brain pop out of his head and tap dance across the table. He stumbled backward, tripping over a chair.
I said,
the angelic voice repeated.
Apologize to the lady.
Chuck struggled to a standing position and turned to Rhoda. He tried, speaking to the side of the badger's head as he squinted up at the glowing figure. Sorry. The light dimmed, and Grayson Conway stepped down from the table, small flames licking out from beneath feathers. He pressed his beak against the rat's nose.
Now get out,
he said, his voice normal once more. Chuck tripped over his own feet, as well as his possum companion, as he ran for the door, throwing one last terrified glance over his shoulder. Thank you, Rhoda said, clutching her chest. That was very chivalrous of you, stepping in like that.
It was nothing, ma'am,
the falcon said, his eyes still fixed on the door through which the rat had disappeared. It most certainly was not nothing, whatever it was, the badger insisted. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that, not since... Well, in any case, she looked around the room, flustered. Oh, go on then, she announced to the room at large, brushing at them with her paws. It's all over, so carry on. Since the trouble had been in relation to him, Jack took this moment to slip away and escape a reprimand. It was well past midnight when Jack leaned his motorcycle against the oak tree and stumbled in the darkness to the front of the mill. With what he had made in tips tonight, keeping his promise to Dr. Walraven would be a breeze. Smiling with sleepy contentment, he rubbed the space between his ears with one paw and reached for the door handle with the other. He stopped mid-reach, all drowsiness shaken from him as his heart jolted. The front door was open. Frozen and staring, he tried to reach back to the moment he'd left. Hadn't he shut it? Maybe the wind blew it open. But that didn't seem likely either. Turning, his wide eyes scanned from the forest on the opposite side of the road all the way down to the bank of the river.
It was a dark night, unusually quiet. He thought of his motorcycle propped against the tree. But where would he go? Even Tom Pillinger's would be shut by this time. Tom Pillinger's, where Grayson Conway and his fellow heroes were staying. How childish they would think him if he showed up in the middle of the night, scared to go into his own house because the door was open, when in all likelihood he'd left it open himself. It was with this thought that he spun to face the door again, pressed his paw against it, and entered. The mill was ghost still. A slim shaft of moonlight shone in through the kitchen window, blanketing the fallen bookshelf at the far end of the living room. Volumes of books had been spilled out across the rug. Jack peered wide-eyed into the room, not crossing the threshold. "Hello?" he called tentatively, his ears and whiskers on end. With a trembling paw, he patted around until he found the light switch, flicking it on without blinking. The lamp, which lay on its side on the floor, cast long shadows across the room. Couch cushions were upturned. The coat rack near the door lay on its side, clothing items scattered around it. Jack's eyes fell on Dr. Walraven's favorite windbreaker. Its pockets were turned outward. He scooped up an umbrella from the mess, brandishing it like a sword as he continued cautiously into the house. But after a thorough and very slow search, he was satisfied that the house was empty. Still shaken, he returned to the front door and locked it, then turned on every light both upstairs and down. He made an effort to clean up some of the mess, but became distracted by a surprising and rather intriguing discovery. He had just finished propping the bookshelf upright and was dragging it to its place in the corner. With his back pressed against the wall, he gave the bookcase one last heave, lifting it slightly upward to get over the corner of the maroon rug, when he felt a click in the wall behind him. As he stepped away from the wall, part of it seemed to come with him. He turned to see that a panel had indeed fallen outward. It hung open like a laundry chute, a secret compartment hidden in the wooden boards behind the bookcase's normal resting place. Peering inside, he found a small collection of items piled at the bottom. The first of these items was a fedora, wide-brimmed and black. There didn't seem to be anything special about it. He set it aside and reached in once more, this time withdrawing a brown paper package. There was nothing unusual about this item either, except in the amount of tape used. It was practically waterproof. It had very few markings, save for the address to the mill, the postage, and a single word scrawled into the upper left corner: "Stronger." When he had considered the package for another moment, shaking it next to his ear like a present and unable to guess at its contents, he set it aside as well. The third item he extracted was a gold-colored envelope. It was shaped like a birthday card, rather than a letter, and to Jack's surprise, it was addressed not to Dr. Walraven, but to Jack himself. It was his birthday, after all, and perhaps Dr. Walraven had planned to give it to him today. Yet it had been mailed, so it couldn't be from Dr. Walraven. But who would send him a card? His only friend outside of Hadensburrow was Alan, and he hadn't spoken to the fox in 2 years, not since he had stormed out and moved to Treeark. He worked his thumb under the flap and tore it open. It was indeed a card, but instead of Happy Birthday or some funny cartoon on the front, there was something else, something that made Jack's heart skip. It was the blue silhouette of a falcon, with its wings extended in either direction and its head turned to one side. It was the insignia of animal control. And in gold letters above the falcon it said, "The Sidekick program is back, and we want you."